Hello, hello. It is top of the hour. I'm gonna let Zoom bring you all in. Oh my gosh, so many familiar faces. Hello, ladies. Hi, come on in. Let's give Zoom a second to auto-populate you. If you're here live, if someone wants to pop in there and let me know that you can see me and hear me, that would be fantastic before we go further. I want to make sure that everything is on point. No tech issues this time. Today we are going to talk about burnout. So I'm happy to see so many people here. Thank you so much, Andrea. Um, okay, perfect. So I don't know if I'm excited to see so many people here, or does that mean so many people are in burnout? The exciting thing is I can help you. So welcome. So let's see. So burnout mean different things to different people. So let's talk about that. I'm going to share with you what it means to me. And I'm talking about two types of burnout and what we want to do when we're feeling burnt out and ways to avoid getting to that point. Okay, so um, let's see, burnout. We have to know what it really means for us in order to fix it, right? We have to be able to know how we want to approach it and get some traction on it and fixing the problem. So, I'd love to hear from you in the Q&A. What does burnout mean to you? That would be awesome. So pop in there. What does it mean? Like, how do you feel when you think you're feeling burnt out? Because it can definitely mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So let me tell you how the class is going to work. We have the Q&A, the chat's disabled. You can put your, it's going to be interactive. So feel free to put your answers in the Q&A because I might ask you some questions. Feel free to put questions in the Q&A. I may not get them till the end because sometimes they spin by pretty quick and I may miss them, or maybe I'm going to be covering that. So feel free to just maybe jot it down or wait till the end, but I'm happy to answer questions then. So I'm going to give you some real actionable steps to help you start feeling better now, signs to watch for, right? We're really going to be teaching some things here. That being said, of course, at the end, I'm going to offer tell you how we can work together. Like if you decide like this is something that you want to work on a one-on-one basis, we'll talk about that. I'll be happy to answer your questions. You can always click the schedule link in the emails that are going to follow the class and schedule a time that works for you for a complimentary discovery call. So I realized how deep in burnout I was. I didn't know really what to call it or where it came from. I didn't understand any of that. But I was deep in burnout in my business, my career, my marriage, and life in general. Some of us feel burnout in maybe at work, but not at home, or at home and not at work, or in a relationship, or whatever. Being a parent, there's different ways that people experience that. Um, but so my mission is to help as many women as possible who do feel at the end of their rope that I can help them. So, and I didn't have the knowledge I know now back then. So I'm here to share it with you. So if you're not familiar with me and my work, I am Melanie McNamara. I am a certified life, weight, and mindset coach. And I really work with women whose lives look very successful from the outside, but on the inside, they're not feeling it. Maybe their successes feel hollow. Maybe they're on the top leaderboard at work or whatever, and it's just not fulfilling for them, right? We got to figure out what's happening for you. And they just really want their inside experience to look as great as their life. They think they should be happier, right? So that's a lot of women I work with, maybe on overeating and over drinking and things like that in relationships. And if you haven't caught the relationship call from last week, let me know and I'll send you the replay. It was fire. So, okay, so let's see. I do all of that using brain science and a mixture of patriarchy and intersectionality, which is just one way of saying that we take a look at how you were conditioned and programmed as you were growing up. Like, what were the messages that you received growing up? And it can be different for different people. Like, if you're a woman or if you're a woman of color or if you're a straight white cis male, with dark hair and tall, like we get different messages, right? So we look at how those messages are affecting the way you're showing up to your life right now. So let me see what do we have here? Apathy for the things I like, I used to like doing, feeling stuck is burnout, no zest for anything, feeling burdened by life's tasks I joyfully took on previously. Oh, that would be something to really explore, right? Sometimes we like, oh yeah, I want to do that thing, but why? Where's that coming from? And we're going to talk about the ways we're socialized as women that we have to be the helpers, and that's where our value lies. Doesn't mean that's where that's coming from, but it is good to get really curious on why we agree to things, or maybe we keep agreeing to things and keep adding things on our plate, right? So, a lot of things for burnout. So, what burnout means to me is a lack of emotional resilience, right? So, resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or the tough things in life, right? And it also can mean the ability of a substance or object or person to spring back into shape, right? If you think about that rubber band that just gets stretched so far, it'll snap back in place and back to where it was. But if you stretch it too far, it just loses all of that elasticity. And sometimes don't you feel like you're just at the end of that rubber band and there's just no way? So, I want to credit the coach that I took most of this information from. I always like to credit where credit is due. She's the teacher I've learned everything I've learned really about burnout and patriarchy and the effects of cultural and familial conditioning. I learned from Cara Lowenthal. So look her up. She's an amazing coach. She's a master coach. She has a program and a podcast called Unfuck Your Brain, and she also has a membership community. So, back to burnout. We can think of burnout as a lack of emotional resilience. So, right? So the emotional strength that you draw on when things feel challenging, right? Maybe when you have a lot of stuff going on at work or you whatever. So, and when your emotional resilience is low, it's like your gas tank is low, right? So sometimes we have challenging things that come up for us and we're just like, it's challenging, but I got it. It's good. I can handle this, right? And then other times, it's like our tank is completely empty. And I like to think of that, like I noticed it for me in some different ways. I'm going to share some different ways it might show up for you too. I'd love to hear from you, what are your reactions sometimes when you're feeling those feelings? And for me, I notice like the littlest thing just sets me off. Like if I stub my toe or maybe spill my coffee or something, or just like I walk in and I'm like, oh, it's such a mess. And I want to lay on the floor like a turtle. Feel like I just can't do it anymore. Right. That's what kind of happens for me. So click here, get that done. Oh, okay. Just checking the comments there. Yeah, irritable. So that's what I was gonna say. So it may show up for you in like feeling overwhelmed, like just heavy in your body. And if you think of it like the stress responses that we have, you've heard of fight, flight, freeze, and some people add like appease or fawn, which are really more like actions. But the stress response is fight, flight. I always get fight, flight, or freeze. Um, those are the responses that usually come up if you look at the animal kingdom. This is how our brains were designed way back in the ages, right? So if you're just feeling like heavy and overwhelmed and tired, I feel like that's like the freeze response. And sometimes your body's just buzzing and you feel just super anxious and stressed. And that's like the flight, like you just want to run away. And then the irritable, that's like the fight. Um, I'm usually in the freeze response, but I'm getting more into the fight sometimes when I do, but I don't get to that point of really burnout anymore, but because I'm aware of the signs. So just notice when one or more of those start showing up for you and when your emotional resilience tank is low, how to spot it, okay? So an ebb and flow is normal. right? There are times in life where things just feel easier, and there are times things feel harder. That's the 50-50 of life. So, what I want to share with you first is it is not your fault at all. You have normal human responses that we just haven't learned the skills to really handle. Mixed in our primal brain, mixed in with our modern society and how we were conditioned is just a recipe for burnout, right? So, first, we think we're supposed to be happy all the time. We've been sold this bill of goods, right? That the purpose of life is to live a happy life. But the fact is, we're not going to be happy all the time. And then when we're not, we're often like beating ourselves up. Well, we should be happier. Okay. So it just creates a whole lot of angst inside us anyway. Um, let's see. Where did I lose my notes? Um, okay. Yeah. So there's a normal variation, right? So with the natural ebb and flow, it's like when your gas tank gets low and you just refuel it, right? So sometimes you might think, I'm going to go on vacation and that'll refresh me. And sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. If you find yourself taking rest and relaxation time off and it's not resting and relaxing your body, then you may be deeper into burnout, right? So with burnout, it's like your gas tank is total empty, not even fumes. It's done. And you're on the side of the highway, have no idea what to do, and you just feel trapped. Okay. So, emotional resilience and burnout is all about your thought process. Okay. The emotions you have when you think a certain way and that impact on your nervous system. So, burnout is created by your brain. Okay. We think it's created by things outside of us, but it is created by our brain. And don't let me lose you here. Because I'm going to keep going. So, your brain is evolved to protect you from any perceived danger, right? We have sensory organs all over our bodies that are gathering info and sending it to our brain. We've got our eyes, and our ears, and our skin, right? Our touch, smell, taste, whatever. But our brain is filtering out things it doesn't need. So, for example, I'm standing here, and when I think about it, I feel like a cool breeze on my leg. I can hear some cars outside. Um, and like little things when I focus on, I just heard a car drive by. Like my brain's filtering that out when I'm talking to you. Um, it filters out what it deems unimportant to us, right? So it's not sending it to our conscious mind. So when it detects something that's seems dangerous or threatening, it sets off these high alert alarm bells. Okay. That is from the primal part of our brain that evolved from the animals. Like we share that brain with the animals that has helped us to survive and reproduce and avoid danger. And our species has survived because of this brain. So thank you, brain. But it it's kind of overworking now in our modern age, right? It's an old system designed to protect us and keep us safe. So if you think about those, like in terms of the stress responses we just talked about, fight, flight, or freeze, if you think about it when you're anxious, like your muscles tense, right? And it's like your body is ready to run from a predator, or your heart starts thumping fast. So that's like pumping blood to your muscles to get ready to run. Or when you're sluggish, like your digestion slows down so that your body can put that energy into escaping. Um, and like it dulls your body. So say you are running and you're tired or you twist an ankle, it dulls that pain so you can keep going. So it's constantly scanning and sending signals, fight, flight, or freeze. And then fawn is like an action. But all different reactions that animals have to a perceived threat, right? So our system is oversensitive. You've seen like your cat freak out when there's like nothing happening. All of a sudden it just jumps up and streaks in the other room, or your dog starts barking its head off for no apparent reason. So it makes a lot of sense from that survival perspective that it is overly sensitive, right? Because like 9 times out of 10, it's nothing. But that 10th time, if you're not aware, if you're an animal or way back in the cave days, you could die. So it's doing its job, right? There's nothing wrong. But if you miss that one time, you're dead. So that's the problem with us in modern times. But if you've seen like animals, they like shake it off. You ever seen that when an animal runs, and then it just kind of shakes itself off? I've seen my cat do that. right? It's kind of like when we exercise or dance or go for a brisk walk, that actually helps us feel better after we've been activated because it moves it through our system. Okay. But the problem is, on top of that, is we do have our brains, our prefrontal cortex that can imagine things. So we're constantly like, our brains are like imagining danger. It's watching the news. It's other people are having things going on in their life. And so it's like danger, like we're imagining futures that aren't even happening, right? Or you're watching a scary movie and intellectually it's not real, but you're still jumping. Okay. So we can create that stress response within ourselves. And in our modern society, we have so much access to like news and everything going on that our bodies just aren't equipped for all that incoming stimuli, right? Notice like after big things like 9/11, we're like glued to the news and our just stress levels are so high. Or I remember in the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of people were just like, oh my God, what's happening? And they're watching the news and hearing stories and imagining this future that's like nobody knew what was going to happen, right? So um sometimes it's overreacting, and then other times we do want it, like you're walking down the street, you got to jump from a car, yes, okay. But we need to learn how to calm down our nervous system in this modern world, right? So let's talk about the two types of burnout. There's external burnout and then there's internal. So with external, it's thoughts you're having about things that are out there in the world, right? So maybe your boss gives you a task, um, and you kind of stress out about it. Or there's like you have a client, your transaction is falling apart. I have some real estate agents on here, right? And then we just get our all elevated, right? And so stress goes up, you feel anxious or overwhelmed, you try to get away from it. Maybe you shop, maybe you find yourself scrolling and shopping or overeating or over drinking, right? Maybe you're taking frantic action in your business and not really producing anything, trying to get away from that stress. Or maybe you're in that freeze response where you're just like, I'm just overwhelmed, and your body shuts down. Okay. If you notice, sometimes, have you ever gone on vacation and immediately you get sick? I believe it's from this type of thing. Like we're on, and then we go on vacation and our body's like, whew, thank God we can get sick now. Like I think that's a thing, right? So the problem is that you're feeling it in your body, and your body's telling your brain you need to get away, but there's no way to get away from your own body. So maybe you'll kind of fake yourself out. You'll be like, oh, it's okay, it's no problem, but you're still feeling the stress. Okay. So what you need to do is plug the leak in that gas tank, right? And we criticize ourselves that we shouldn't be feeling the stress. So we add another layer of just beating ourselves up. Um, right. So we triple our own distress by saying we shouldn't be feeling this way, and then we add stress to our stress. And this is just how brains work. That's what I'm saying. It's not your fault. It's how your brains work. You may be thinking, oh, I'm so behind, I'll never catch up, I should be more organized. um this sounds really mean, this text, or I shouldn't be having this response, right? So the first thing you want to do is practice noticing your thoughts. Okay, we're talking about thoughts here. So practice noticing what you're thinking. And then the second thing on that is practice getting curious. So when you're feeling curious, you're taking away all the judgment over something. So when you're getting curious about your thought, if you're thinking, oh, I'm so behind, you'd be like, oh, that's so curious that I'm thinking I'm so behind when I'm right on time. Like, where is that coming from? So you can really question yourself in a loving, compassionate way. And you really can't skip that step about being curious, because listen, if you have something broken, if your ceiling fan was broken and you're like, oh, it's just broken, I don't know what to do about it, I'm going to just keep flicking the light switch. If you never get curious about why your ceiling fan isn't working, you'll never be able to fix it. Right. But if you're judging it like, oh, that ceiling fan should be working, and you're like judging the hell out of it, you're never going to figure out. You're never going to be able to fix it. So let's take out all the judgment over our thoughts and get super curious. So I want to give you one magic phrase that you can remember to say to yourself when you're having a reaction and you start telling yourself you shouldn't be having it. I like to say to myself, oh, how human of me, right? Like, think about that whenever you make a mistake or you say something that you wish you hadn't or whatever, you're just feeling anxious or you're irritable or whatever, be like, oh, you get curious. Why am I feeling irritable? Oh, it's because I feel like I think there's so much to do and I just don't think I can handle it. And you'd be like, oh, how human of me. Okay. It's a way of really practicing acceptance of yourself. And, when things are not going the way you really would like them to go, just practicing that can alleviate some of that additional stress that you're putting on yourself. Because as we go about our day, we're like waterboarding, drip, drip, drip ourselves with constant negative thoughts that don't even seem negative on the surface, right? It just seems like we're telling the news or, like these are just the facts. Like, yeah, I'm just disorganized. Or, yeah, I did okay on this job, but it was a fluke because other people helped me. Notice those things, right? Um, so one way you can do that is just one moment, please. Okay, come on. My dog wanted to come in. She's getting a little excited. What's going on here? Okay. I'm hearing her out there just kind of low level whining. So my brain picked that up. Not an emergency, but if you have a pet, they want to be with you. So, okay. Um, oh, I have a question. Okay. So I started a new job, she says, and I'm feeling like there's too many tasks that I can't handle. I feel like that's causing my burnout. Okay. So here's the thing. It's not the job and it's not the tasks. It's your thoughts about them. Your thoughts about this is too much, or you didn't really mention what thoughts you're having, but I'm imagining, like maybe a little imposter syndrome falls in there, right? Like, oh, I'm not sure I can handle this, or this is too much, or I'm not sure I'll be able to figure all this out. I have to work hard to prove my worth. All of those things. Those are the thoughts that are creating that feeling of overwhelm and burnout. So just wanted to address that really quick. Um, so I have a few other things in here. Um, so learning, first of all, to be kind and loving to yourself. And I do have a class coming up on that where we really dive a little bit deeper into what does that look like, and being kind and loving to ourselves. But I think learning to talk to ourselves in a loving, compassionate, graceful way, or humor. I always say love, grace, compassion, or humor is always available to us. One or more of those in combination. And when we can apply that to ourselves, we can show up so much better for our lives, right? Um, so some of the thoughts you might be thinking, you could possibly think about things going on is, like, it's possible my brain is wrong about this. Like if your brain's criticizing you, um, and by the way, that's internal burnout. So external burnout is caused by our thoughts about things outside of ourselves. And it's not two separate columns. It's like a Venn diagram, right? They overlap. So we've got things outside of ourselves that happen that we have thoughts about that create a lot of stress for us. And then we have thoughts about those thoughts. We shouldn't be that way, right? But then we have internal, and that's what that is. That's all that drip, drip, drip negative self talk that oftentimes we find ourselves in. Okay. It's really a radical act for us to take care of ourselves. And society, culture will tell us that first it's like confusing because they're like, well, you can't spend time on yourself, but you have to be beautiful and have a clean house and be well rested and all of that. But don't spend time on yourself. Don't think about yourself too much, right? So there's a lot of those conflicting messages we get too. So let's go back to so like external burnout. Maybe your kid has a tantrum and you suddenly have thoughts of like they should not be acting this way, or I'm so embarrassed, or people are watching me, right? Or you see an email from a particular person that you're like, oh, that can't be good news. What do you make that mean about the email, about them, or a text, or you get a knock on the door? I have these primal responses to a lot. Like I've turned off notifications on my phone because immediately my body just is like, oh, because I am in constant one or two or three of fight, flight, or freeze. A lot of us who maybe have trauma in our past, our bodies are in that constant state of alert. So when you get something like a text message or the phone rings or someone knocks on the door, you have that instant response. So some of the ways that we can reduce some of our stress about like bigger, let's think about big picture things, pandemics, wars in Ukraine, things like that, injustices in the world. Oftentimes I think we think that we should be all worked up about it, or it means we don't care. But it's the opposite. Like if we're all so worked up about things that we can't even think straight, we can't do anything about it, right? It doesn't mean we don't care. Taking care of ourselves means that we can show up and make a difference in the world. So some thoughts you might want to think on those bigger picture one is, there's nothing I can control about this, but I can take care of myself. I can do small things to help people around me, maybe, right? So that news of the world is just being crammed at us constantly, right? And then it's fueled by advertising with clickbait headlines, and your brain can't tell the difference between a lion and that headline that you have got to click to find out all the atrocities going on in the world. So what we're not doing here is pretending that the world is perfect. We're not pretending that we're going to feel amazing all the time. There's no toxic positivity, which means just pretending everything's great and it's all good, like toxic zen. I have a friend who calls it, she's like, I was in my toxic zen space where like, I was like, it's all good, it's good. And there was all this stuff under the surface that she wasn't addressing, right? Right. Sticking our head in the sand, right? We can work on those thoughts and work on ourselves and creating more resilience for ourselves by putting balance in how much time we spend putting stress response thoughts in our brain. Okay. Taking things personally about ourselves. When people do things, again, back to the relationship class, people do things out in the world. Sometimes we make it mean something about ourselves or or even our survival, right? So the foundational way to change burnout with external burnout really is change your thoughts again about yourself and how you react, right? Take your judgment off and what your capacity and resilience is, can be. There's a quote, we have an infinite capacity. Oh my God, I wrote it down, but I don't know where it is in my notes. We have an infinite capacity to suffer, just as we have an infinite capacity for resilience. Okay. Well, we don't recognize that. If you've heard of Viktor Frankl, he was a psychologist. He was in a concentration camp. And one of his quotes is, the last of human freedoms is to choose one attitude in any set of given circumstances. And this was a man who was in concentration camps, lost his family. He was an educated man. He was already a psychologist. And his driving factor that got him through is he wanted to do his work, put his work out in the world. We'll sum it up that way. And what he noticed in the concentration camps were that the people who felt hopeless and helpless and had no reason, nothing moving them forward, they were the ones who perished, right? But he shares about how much resilience he saw in the capacity of human beings to be resilient. Okay. Um, Nishi, if you ever watch The Good Place, I love watching The Good Place. There's like golden nuggets in that show. Nishi says, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." So basically, we all think, if we have a compelling reason, gotta have that big why. You talk about it with goals, but just in general, like having that compelling reason, a purpose, a meaning for your life, that can help you cultivate hope and resilience moving forward. What I noticed was that when I was diagnosed with stage 3 triple negative breast cancer, well, the first thing was, I told you how I was so deep in burnout in my life, my business, my career, everything. That's when I was diagnosed with cancer. And to me, it was a relief. It was a relief from that hopeless, desperate, helpless place I was in. I felt trapped in every area of my life. And I couldn't, I was like, this is what the rest of my life is going to look like. And then I got diagnosed. Um, yes, I had thoughts and feelings of like, oh my gosh, I'm scared, and all of that. But it was, I was able to pull myself out of this life and have a different perspective on something, which is why I know, like, the only like, our feelings are created by our thoughts, because I had way different thoughts about being diagnosed than a lot of people. Okay. So I think it was like I could focus on this thing outside of me that I didn't have control on. Um and then just work on myself at the same time, and I could not deal with the rest of my life. So I think that was really helpful for me. But um just noticing where I turned the corner on that, and how I started to see, like, envision my life. I had so many more possibilities than I ever dreamed when I was over here pre-cancer. So so the part I was going to say was, I would have people say to me, how are you doing this? I would be curled up in a corner crying if it was me. And I'm like, you have so much more capacity for resilience than you can even imagine. Right? You can remember all the times that you've gotten through in the past to help you continue to create that resilience. So, um, one of the ways I looked at my cancer journey is, I decided, hey, I'm all in. I am all in for this journey. This is a chapter of my life, and I'm going to be all in. I'm not going to wish it away. If you ever seen that movie Click with Adam Sandler, you guys, that's a really good movie. But he gets this magic remote so he could skip over all the parts of his life that he felt like he was suffering and he didn't like. And next thing he knew, he was at the end of his life, and it was not happy. So, I mean, I think it had a happy ending in the end. I don't remember now, but it was really good. Um, so find a purpose that really matters to you. Um, it it's just a decision you can make, like connecting yourself to something that really matters and observing your thoughts, right? Having self-compassion. So that's the first step, right? Is not judging your thoughts about your thoughts and your feelings. Creating self-compassion for yourself, and then introducing a new intentional thought, right? So um, observing with curiosity, creating self-compassion for you being in the human experience, and then introducing new intentional thoughts about it. So I offered the thought, how human of me, right? That can apply to other people too. Going back to a relationship class, you can apply that to other people. When other people say and do things, you can even think, oh, how human of them, right? Um, so using that technique, I think, is a beautiful way to and you can play around with it. I'm just offering you a thought. Thoughts are like clothes. You try them on and you decide how they feel, right? My thoughts may not feel exactly the same as yours. So play around with it. Like, this is you taking agency over your own authority in your life. Like, I get to think and feel any way I want to about anything. Isn't that the best news ever? I love it. I love it so much. And it's not saying that life is perfect and I better just think positive thoughts. It's toxic positivity. It's like, yeah, there's crap that goes on in the world, and I get to decide how I want to be in my own life. How do I want to think about it? So again, I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying, that you should change your thoughts, because some thoughts, yeah, I mean, you get to do you, but some thoughts serve us and some don't, right? So you get to create that own authority. You don't have to get anyone's permission to change your thinking. And we as women are often taught that we have to get other people's approval. Not even often. We are taught like we have to get everyone's approval and validation in order to feel worthy and feel, like we matter. But taking back authority over your own life, okay? Over your own thoughts. This is not blaming other people for our circumstances. So, for example, like some people might think, oh, so it's my fault that I'm burned out, or my fault the way I'm looking at the world. And I'm like, no. I like this analogy of like, if you found out that there were toxic chemicals in your house and you were sick, I wouldn't say it's your fault that you got toxic chemicals in your body. Too bad for you. Um, no, it's kind of the same thing. Like when we start to open our eyes to what the messages that we get from society, from the patriarchy, from our patriarchal society, from the way we were brought up as women or women of color or marginalized society, whatever it is, when we can recognize that, then we can decide how we want to think and feel. Um, and not feel powerless and trapped and hopeless and helpless around it. Let's see. So to recap, let's recap some of this here. Oops. So burnout is a lack of emotional resilience. And we have two types. We have external and internal. And external are simply things that happen outside of us that we have thoughts about. And then internal burnout is that constant drip, drip, drip of negative thoughts that we have about ourselves. And if you're unsure, like if you're like, well, this is just a thought, like if you think this is just me being humble, we're taught we should be humble, or we should, share the credit of things, or we're just pointing out, you know, things about ourselves. I picture yourself saying that to like a 5-year-old. Like if they came home with an award for something they did it in kindergarten, and be like, well, yeah, that's really, but it's really not that great. Or your teacher was just being nice to you when she gave you that award. Or yeah, nobody really liked that. They were just pretending, right? Like that's how you know when you're saying some really mean shit to yourself without realizing it. So think about that. Like we have thoughts like, oh, I'm not sure I'm smart enough to do this thing. I'm not sure I have the motivation to create this business over here, whatever it is. Imagine saying that to little you, little 5-year-old you. Keep a little picture. I have a picture of my granddaughter right here, and often I'll just look at it and I'll be like, would I say that to her? No, I would never say that to her. So don't say it to yourself, really. There's a quote, your cells eavesdrop on your thoughts. Okay. So your body is eavesdropping on all the things that's going through your brain. So be really observant and intentional about what you're thinking, without judgment. So the goal with external burnout is to reduce the stress from the things you can't control, right? So you want to focus on the thoughts that create your own like emotional resilience, right? So just noticing what you can control can get you out of that helpless and hopeless place. Like thoughts, again, how human of me. Humans are capable of so much more than we think. I can do my part here in my community to help. Any small thing matters. Like you decide. Like again, it's very individual, right? So that's the thing. So then with internal, our goal, of course, is to change that self-talk. So maybe you get a text from a family member who says, "Hey, you really hurt my feelings when you did this thing." And then your thought is, "Oh my God, I'm a terrible mother, sister, daughter, whatever it is." And it creates that stress within you, right? And then from there, when you're feeling that stress and anxiety and shame or whatever comes up for you with that thought, notice what you do from there, right? What are all the things you say to yourself in your head? How do you respond, right? Or do you ruminate? Is it just a constant beat down? Or are you flipping it around and you're like pointing the finger and blame, blame, blame back at the other person? You're creating your own burnout, right? So, um, reduce the self-critical talk and increase your self-regard thinking. Okay, so reducing the self-critical talk, you got to notice it first and not judge it. Just be like, "Oh, how human of me to think that thought," right? So stop. Don't be judgy about it. Don't be critical about your critical thinking about yourself. And then getting to a place, we don't even have to get to positive self-regard. It depends where you're at. You may be like, "Yeah, most of the time I think I'm pretty nice to myself." Awesome. That's perfect. So keep focusing on those thoughts. Notice when ones that are maybe less than stellar pop in, and you want to increase those. So if you're someone who's much more into really that beat down of yourself, just getting to neutral thoughts, like "how human of me," is going to be really helpful for you. It's kind of like the 10% less shitty rule. What thought can I think about myself that's maybe 10% less shitty? I use the example of somebody who wants to lose weight. You can't go from "I hate my body" to "I love my body." There's just no way. There's like a cognitive dissonance. Your brain, you'll never believe that. But you can go from "I hate my body" to "I have a human body." Um, I maybe I like parts of my body, right? And focus on the things that you do like and just start laddering your way up with those thoughts. 10% less shitty. um, so again, focusing on the thoughts you already have. So the 5 things that might come up for you when for to spot and some of the blocks to creating more emotional resilience for yourself and less burnout. Um, Always seeking validation from outside yourself. Of course you are. Like, I like to say that to myself too. "Oh, of course you're thinking that thing or you're feeling that way. Of course. How human of me." That's my little humor I put in there with it too. But we're taught again, I think I can't tell how many people are in here. I think most of you are women. We are socialized that not only are we socialized as women, this is where the patriarchy comes in. Not only are we socialized that we are there for other people's pleasure, to do things for other people, to be a mom, like to be a selfless mom, like that is um just implicitly stated to us. You have to be a good mom. We get one day a year where they're like, "Oh, she was so selfless. She's so selfless. Let's celebrate mom this one day." Right? So we were conditioned that way, but also again, going back to our brains, we are a tribal species. We way back when, if you were ostracized from the group for whatever reason, it meant certain death, right? You had no protection, no shelter, possibly no food, rival tribes wanting to kill you or do terrible things to you, right? So it makes so much sense that we're out there looking to other people as our validation vending machines. That's something Kara says. I love it. It cracks me up because if you think of it that way, or like a little Pac-Man gobbling up the validation pellets, we want to self-validate. Celebrate yourself, validate yourself, right? Regardless if somebody else is validating you or not. The second thing I mentioned it before is we often think we have to prove that we care so much by whipping ourselves up into a frenzy. Have you ever had someone say to you, like, "Don't you care about this thing?" They're all worked up and they're like, "Don't you care?" And you're like, "Yeah, I care. I do." Or vice versa. Maybe it's you going, "How am I not caring about this thing?" And they're like, I do care, but they're not in that stress response. Right. So noticing when that comes up for you. Um, Number three, we're afraid to rest and relax because we are taught we have to be productive. How I coach so many women and they're like, well, I just don't feel productive when I go take a nap. And I'm like, what if that's the most productive thing you can do? Like, and what does productive even mean? And why do you even have to be productive? Like, let's really dig into that for you. What's happening for you that on your rest and relaxation time, you're beating yourselves up, or you should be doing work. Um, oh, I have women who are like, I feel guilty when I'm resting and at home with my family, and I feel guilty when I'm at work because I'm not with my family. And it's just, it's never ending, right? That's all optional. That comes from our thoughts. So questioning those. Um, oh, the fourth one, we think that we are driven by self-criticism. How many times do you think, well, I got that goal because I was just so hard on myself and I just was pushing myself and pushed myself and pushed myself and I reached that goal, whether it's a weight loss goal or a goal at work or a money goal or something like that. You don't have to criticize. And, what if you got that goal in spite of all your self criticism, right? Not because of it. Imagine what you could do if you were loving the shit out of yourself the whole way. Imagine what you do if you were your own best cheerleader, loving yourself, allowing yourself rest, right? Allowing yourself to think amazingly delicious, delightful thoughts about yourself. What could you do then? Right. And then the fifth one, this is a big one. We think if we think highly of ourselves, we'll be egotistical or narcissistic or we'll be cocky or, and there's a difference between confident and cocky, right? Feeling confident is like, I'm amazing and you're amazing. And we're both amazing and we're all amazing. And that's awesome. Right? Cocky is like, I'm amazing and I'm above you. Okay. So notice if you're thinking, what if I think too highly of myself, I might be too self-absorbed. What I want to offer is when we're thinking terrible critical thoughts about ourselves, that's when all we do is think about ourselves. Think about it. When you're feeling like I don't fit in my clothes, right? Like, oh, I feel fat. I hear that a lot. I feel fat. Fat's not a feeling, it's a thought. Like, I feel fat. All you're doing is focused on yourself the whole time. What are they thinking of me? What am I thinking of me? I should be different. All the things, we're so focused on ourselves. But if we were feeling loving and confident towards ourselves, we would be focused on the people that we want to serve out there in our businesses or our lives, our families. I want to offer that being kind is not always nice and nice is not always kind. So if you're thinking of, say, the people in your family, and you're like, well, I want to do things for them because that's the nice thing to do. You're doing things, it's like a manipulative way too. You're like over delivering because you want everyone to approve of you. And we don't think of it in that way. But I want you to really explore that. We're doing things to get them to think a certain way about us. And we're not thinking that way about ourselves. We're not loving ourselves. I think it's kinder to say, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that thing today. Maybe I don't have the capacity to do that thing. Right. You can tell people that even, or you can just say, oh, no, thank you. Thank you for asking, but I'm not going to be doing that today. I'm getting much better at that. And not saying I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't. Not making excuses, right? I used to make all the excuses. I'm like, okay, what can I tell them so I can get out of doing this thing? Instead of just, saying, oh no, that's not something I'm interested in right now. And people are gonna get shocked, and that's okay. But when you really focus on your own self-care and your own self-talk, and you're creating emotional resilience. So, um, that's what I have for you, right? So we've got the steps, we've got the blocks that might come up for you. I've got some ways for you to kind of change that internal self-talk. And these are things you can take with you and use and implement them in the rest of your life. What I want to offer, what I do one-on-one coaching, and it's a specialized look, a nurturing, loving look into your brain and what's going on for you and the way, you were socialized. What are your thoughts about work and money and worth and productivity and being a mom and what being a wife means, or, in what area of your life are you feeling burnt out? Um, because sometimes we think, well, if we just I'm just going to stay burnt out, but that's not affecting anyone else, right? It's not teaching anyone else a lesson. Sometimes we're like, well, if I'm just so burnt out, my boss will notice, or my spouse, or whatever. It's like, no, you're not doing anyone any favors by staying burnt out. um I'm not I'm not saying you should even stay in a relationship or a job or something because you're like, I need to manage my thoughts around this. It's like you can change that. But I would say if there's like a whole environment that you're feeling burnt out in at work, or maybe there's just parts of your job, let's figure out how to manage those thoughts around that. Um, but we can't see that perspective. I would say we can't read the label from inside the jar. And this is probably more apropos, we can't see the water that we're swimming in till we really open our eyes with an outside perspective. When we look at it, we've got the brain science, but then we also have the patriarchy and the conditioning, right? When we were raised in an environment, we don't know any different. And when you start to recognize the areas in your life that internalized patriarchal thinking is coming up for you. I just did a post on, I noticed in my relationship challenge, I was talking about a doctor and I just said, just he, doctor, if he does this thing. I was using an analogy. If you break the kind of coaching I do is called causal coaching. We get to the cause and we fix the cause, not the symptoms. So what I was saying was you go to the doctor and he prescribes you painkillers. You go home, you feel better, and then it just gets worse. You have to go back to the doctor and get the painkillers instead of fixing the broken leg. But I noticed I just said he. And the thing is, I don't have a male. I have a female doctor. I have a female dentist. I have a female, I had a female oncologist. My master coach is a female. I have females around me all the time. This is not that I hate men. I love men very much. I have a husband and 2 sons and all the things, right? I love men very much. I have great doctors who are men before, and I've had some shitty doctors who are men. This is just saying that that has taught us that the authority is male. Okay. Generally a cis white male who's tall with dark hair, I think. Right. They're the authority. So just noticing the little ways it kind of sneaks into how we're showing up. Could be like if you're in a meeting at work and there's like some men and they're speaking and you like start to speak up and they speak over you and you just back down. You're like, well, maybe my idea wasn't good enough anyway. That's another thought. Like, how often have you started a sentence saying, well, this would be a stupid idea, but, or something like that, right? So, again, having that coach weekly that you can come to and say, this happened, help me sort this out, um, is invaluable, right? You can make changes implementing all of this. It's wonderful. But to have someone who's highly trained to really spot the thoughts that are creating the feelings that you are taking action or inaction from, where those like negative thoughts are coming up, we don't even notice them. Do not even notice them. We discount ourselves on the daily. Mine used to be, I noticed that I would always say, oh, that's so stupid. And that's what I would say about myself. Sometimes I would do something or say something. And my internal voice, and even out loud, sometimes I would be like, oh, that's so stupid. And when I realized that after being coached, it took me a while. And then I realized I never say that anymore. Never say that so stupid. And just finding those little thoughts that in subtle, small ways hold us back from really creating the life that we really want to create. Okay. So, if you have any questions about that, feel free to respond to the email, schedule a call. I would love to talk to you about working with you one on one. Um, we can coach on one particular thing each week. We can set a goal and I can help you reach your goals, whatever it is you want. Even intangibles, like I just want to feel better in my daily life. I want to be less reactive to things. Totally. That's what we'll work on. And the strategic byproduct of maybe working on one thing is that it affects all areas of your life, because for our brains, how we do one thing is how we do everything. And really figuring that out and noticing it and being intentional and taking our judgment off of ourselves and being curious and compassionate and loving towards ourselves, that is how you really create the life that you crave to live, right? I want a better life. Um, so I like to think of coaching as like the gym for your mind and your emotions, right? We're like, I got to get to the gym. Like, what about your mind gym? That's the most important thing. My life has changed huge, right? So, I hope this was helpful for everyone. And if you're interested, just reply to the email or schedule a call in the calendar link that may be in the email. But thank you all for coming. Next week we're doing a 5-day pop-up training. It'll be so fun. It's going to be at 1:30 next week, daily. And I'm just going to teach you the 5 steps to making more money. And it's the 5 categories of things there are in the world. We're going to talk about circumstances, thoughts, feelings, actions, and results next week. And I'm excited for that. So make sure you register at the link. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. And I will see you next time.